This Steve Jones Show podcast is now loading. The Steve Jones Show podcast is presented by Sunbury Motor Company and Purdy Insurance. Bringing you an in-depth look at Penn State sports and more. This is the Steve Jones Show on News Radio 1070 WKOK. The Steve Jones Show is presented by Purdy Insurance and Sunbury Motor Company. Now from the Sunbury Motor Studio, here's Steve Jones.
And half hour brought to you by Sunbury Motors, 4th Street in Sunbury. Sunbury Motors, Kia, routes 11 and 15 in Hummels Wharf, and online at sunburymotors.com. Ford, Kia, Hyundai, the best in new inventory. Great pre-owned inventory with the all-important Sunbury Motors guarantee. They go over every vehicle. Terrific service department, quick lane inspections, routine difficult. They handle it all at Sunbury Motors, 4th Street in Sunbury. Sunbury Motors, Kia, routes 11 and 15 in Hummels Wharf, and online at sunburymotors.com. Always pleased to bring in, especially at this time of the year, Neal Coolong. It's been fast and furious as expected. Neal, welcome back to the show.
You bet. As always, it's my pleasure to be here, especially this time of the year.
All right, so anything in all this quick movement, which is expected, anything surprise you?
No, at this point, I don't really think so. I kind of thought the Steelers, for instance, they were going to spend some money. You kind of saw that coming. Maybe not so much with a second cornerback the way they did with Jamel Dean, but a very solid signing for them. I would have expected probably an extension for Joey Porter to come perhaps before they dipped into the free agent market for a cornerback, but the right move, certainly one I thought that they would make. Kenneth Gainwell signing with Tampa Bay. Not a surprise, a little out of their price range, I guess. I wouldn't have thought $1.5 million over 2 years between friends would have been enough to get him out of Pittsburgh, considering he's a team MVP. The guy they're likely to bring back at quarterback, spoke volumes of him during the season. So maybe a little surprised, but Rico Dowdle is an excellent running back. I think a very comparable one to Gainwell in overall production, if not stylistically, maybe a little bit different. A solid move overall. I would say from a surprise perspective, Malik Willis's market didn't really materialize to the level that I thought that it would. And some of that, I think, is due to the fact that there are two veteran quarterbacks on the market able and presumably going to play for a minimum amount for a new team this season, in Kyler Murray and Tua Tagovailoa. Between the two of them, you've got middling level of ability from what we've seen. Perhaps a fresh start would help for either one of them, but it should soak up the market of teams looking for a starting quarterback. That in and of itself wasn't a surprise. The fact that Malik Willis went into that market and still signed a 3-year contract, I thought was a little different. Probably good for a player, but everything I've seen of that deal really looks team-friendly. And I wouldn't have thought, obviously he has ties with Miami. Jeff Hafley, the head coach there, was a defensive coordinator in Green Bay, at least practiced against Willis at times throughout the season. Obviously knows him well enough to want to bring him in there, but I would think his market value would be a little bit higher, and perhaps if one, if not both, of a highly paid but very low price for new teams to acquire in Tua and Murray, I would have thought Willis would say, you know what, this isn't going to work out just due to circumstances. It's hard to pay one guy $30+ million when you can get guys with vastly more experience, younger guys, they're roughly the same age, available due to circumstances more than anything else. So I would have thought with that, Willis kind of would have said, you know what, 2-year deal, give me some money up front, let's see where this goes. Or at the very least, make year 3 the level of, a franchise kind of quarterback. So I'm either going to get paid that, I'm going to get released so I can get back into free agency, and or we're going to talk about negotiating an extension. his contract basically doesn't move Miami any which way if Willis does really well. So I think that deal, I mean, let's presume Willis comes in and does really well. Sam Darnold-like from last year. Let's just say, I understand, most people aren't exactly betting on that to happen, but if it does, Miami's got the best quarterback deal in football. And I find it odd that Willis would have put himself into that kind of position, especially considering Darnold is facing that right now. Seattle has an excellent position with a very good quarterback who just won him a Super Bowl. They're not going to have to pay very much. I would have thought Willis would have thought that going in, wouldn't have signed on for 3 years. But, if it's a good fit, certainly was a lot more money than he has been making, and $45 million guaranteed over 3 years. It's not too bad. I just thought maybe he could have done a little bit better than that.
I'm wondering with him if he looked at it and thought about that word you use, fit. In other words, where can I succeed? I'm going to get paid anyway. And I'm wondering if that played – I mean, not everybody thinks that way, and I don't know the guy at all. Maybe that's what he was thinking. Maybe he looked around and said, this is the best spot for me. I'm just going to go there because I'm getting paid.
I will hope – for his sake that that's the case, and part of me says I hope Miami didn't know that and kind of leverage it. But to be fair, I don't think Miami could have made much of a better offer than they did, considering how much money they have to pay Tua this season. Teams that move on from a quarterback. You look at what Denver had to do to get past Russell Wilson. They weren't able to go out and sign top of market free agent to play quarterback. They had to draft Bo Nix. I don't care what they say. I don't care how good people think Bo Nix is after 2 years in the league. There is no way they expected Bo Nix to be the guy they had to draft where they drafted him. That's not how that board was lined up in any scenario that I saw leading into that draft. That was the most surprising first 13 picks in NFL history, in my opinion. Either way, they had to work through that debt to Wilson to get where they are now. They've done a phenomenal job of that, no doubt, but they had to have a cheap quarterback. They had to have a guy that from day one was going to come in and play. I kind of thought Miami was going to do that, and if not, end up starting Quinn Ewers, have him be the cheap bridge quarterback until they can kind of figure things out with the new regime, kind of a proverbial year zero, if you will. I think Arizona is doing that. It's almost laughable if you look at the quarterback options that they have in front of them right now. Obviously, it's not going to be Kyler Murray. They signed Gardner Minshew, and Minshew might legitimately be their starter. That just might have to be the way that it goes. And you tie that into Pittsburgh, allegedly waiting on Rodgers, or Rodgers is waiting to kind of test the market. Minnesota is an option as well. I think between those two, obviously Murray's not going to Arizona. Murray's probably going to Minnesota, but why not Pittsburgh? That's not a terrible option, and it's not one that Murray could say absolutely not to. Rodgers has always been pegged into Pittsburgh. You would have thought if he really wanted that, he wouldn't have explored free agency in the first place, which is what he's doing. Right. So maybe Arizona's on the table for Rodgers. It's interesting to see how all that plays out, but it's low dollar stuff. These aren't. They're starters in the NFL. All of them are going to be playing well under market value for a starter, with the idea in mind that they're trying out, essentially, trying to earn an extension and or a new contract in free agency next year. So maybe not necessarily the most appealing situation for a lot of people, but as much as we can glean in the first 26 hours of free agency, quarterbacks kind of took a step back, I think, in a lot of ways. With the value and the deal itself. But I would agree Willis had to have had some level of comfort, specifically with Miami, in my opinion, to sign for, to sign a 3-year deal that well under market value and really not bet on himself to have high-level success there, at least right away.
I'll slip in a couple of quick notes here. Geno Smith's been traded by the Raiders to the Jets, so he goes back to New York where he started his career for a 7th-round pick. And the Detroit Lions have signed Pacheco to go with Gibbs in the backfield. So Isaiah Pacheco goes there, so I thought I'd throw those two in. After free agent moves, drafts still to come. Are the Steelers any better? Because it looks to me like they just exchanged names and nothing happened.
I think that is at least reasonable to say. We've seen this. You know, they traded for a receiver last season, gave him a $30 million a year extension. It was a second and a fifth going to Seattle for DK Metcalf. They trade for Michael Pittman Jr. this year, similar in the sense that both Metcalf and Pittman are guys that used to be primary guys in the offense that they were in. New coaches came in, emerging stars came in, and they didn't get benched, but their role in the offense lessened a bit to the point where we're paying them a lot of money. They're not going to get the ball as much with us as they might with somebody else. We can kind of profit from this. I think the trade with Indianapolis is very favorable. I mean, it really was more or less, Pittsburgh, you want to take this guy? We don't want to pay him. You're probably not going to give us much, but something is fine. We just want him off our books. And Pittsburgh is saying, well, we can get him on our contract. We don't want him to play on your contract. We'll put him on ours, which is going to put him, well below where Metcalf is, but certainly high enough to think that he is a purpose. He has a purpose in our offense. He's not just coming in for a spot. We've got something specifically designed for him, paying him what we are. And let's be honest, with the Steelers, more than anything, this finally was the second higher level receiver, veteran receiver, that they have tried the last 3 seasons to get and have failed every step of the way. They finally got a deal done. Pittman's probably on the level that you would have expected for them to want to pay. They had to pay Metcalf after acquiring him. They're paying Pittman after they're acquiring him. But they finally have two, I hate to use this phrase, it's just the most convenient one. They finally have 2 adults in their receiver room. They haven't had that in a long time. It's been kind of a gong show there. So in that sense, I feel like there is a sense of experience. There is a sense of consistent professional production and conduct to some extent. I'm saying that with DK Metcalf in mind, but they've got that together. That is a little bit different. But like I said at the beginning of this, statistically, there really is not much difference between Gainwell and Dowdle. Gainwell's been in the league a little bit longer. Dowdle's a little bit more explosive. Gainwell's maybe a little bit better of a receiver. But considering it's one deal is I believe 14 was it, I think, for Gainwell in Tampa Bay. It's 12.5 for Dowdle in Pittsburgh, and along with Jalen Warren's 3 for 17 that he signed last year, these are all very similar players. So they're really kind of plugging the same guys in. Obviously, it's a different coach, largely a new staff. You might have a new left tackle, not new in the sense that Kyle Cook might be playing left tackle for you like he did toward the end of last season. You might not have Broderick Jones. Probably have a new left guard that you're going to bring in. But I don't know fundamentally how much different last offseason is compared to this offseason, where we are right now. Players are obviously going to change, but are they really different at a 5,000-foot level? I'm not sure of that where we sit. And I think I'll draw this way. I know this is not why you were asking, but to me, it's more like maybe people will see now that Mike Tomlin was not the totalitarian dictator that people think that he was, ruling everything. Yep. Maybe there are other people in charge of the franchise. They're the ones that are not single-handedly, but they're part of a group that's making these decisions. And this is the type of player that they want. This is the kind of money that they want to spend. They're addressing the things that they have to address, but we're not seeing anything radically different than what they've done. And maybe we'll see more of that. I don't know. Just the first test this new administration has, you could replace a lot of the guys that they signed with the guys they signed last year. To me, it's really that similar. we'll see how it works out. Obviously, some are going to say last year was a success. Some are going to say that it wasn't, and that's been kind of the conversation around the Steelers for the last 7 years. It's a little bit of both, and I'm not sure if the trajectory that they were on was altered much to this point in free agency. And I would imagine maybe at some point you're going to sign a veteran tackle. I'm sure it doesn't sound good for Broderick Jones, unfortunately, but either way, in the offseason, they're going to have somebody with some experience to go along with Cook to compete for that left tackle spot. And they'll probably bring in a veteran left guard as well. Beyond that, I don't know how much more money they're going to spend on free agents, certainly none of note. This is kind of what they have. You go into the draft and see what you're going to get. If you draft in 21, you're not going to get high-level difference-making types of players. You can get a couple good ones, I'm sure, but overall, I don't know how much this team has fundamentally changed or how much they should expect it to change.
Which brings me to the Eagles. They haven't signed anybody. Jahan Dotson ends up going to Atlanta. Reed Blankenship ends up going to Houston. Nakobe Dean goes to the Raiders. Phillips goes to Carolina. 3 of those 4 guys were starters or big players, like Phillips, a big player for them down the stretch on defense last year. Are you surprised at all by the lack of movement by Philadelphia? Because Howie Roseman normally is pretty aggressive with stuff.
I think, what goes up must come down, particularly in the NFL when it comes to spending. I don't mean that the Eagles are preparing for a terrible season. I just mean more they've spent a lot. They've given up draft assets. When you have to rebuild your base, you tend to want to do that with draft picks. And I think what they're saying is we've got what we need for now. We can bring in lower-level guys to replace some of these guys that are not, all out-and-out valuable. But we're probably coming out on the positive side of the comp formula. We'll get some mid-level picks back for the 27 draft, and that will be kind of the point where we're really rebuilding that base. We're preparing for that now. For us now, we're probably not going to go out and spend a bunch of money. I think it was pretty obvious they weren't going to sign Phillips back. A great player, a very smart signing by Carolina. I don't think anybody expected him to get the money that he got. But the thing you have to remember, when it comes to the market in the NFL, it's not free. It's not open. There are all kinds of artificial roadblocks and kind of sticking points. When you have a team, it affects everybody. When you have a team like the Las Vegas Raiders that really haven't spent money in 3 years, they're in danger of running afoul for, I think, the first time, including all those Bengals years where they didn't pay anybody. The first time in the 3-year cycle of it, they have to be above a certain level in spending. They're almost the first team to not reach that. They had to go out and spend. I promise you, every agent of every free agent player who was out there wanted to talk to the Raiders first. I mean, they had the gross domestic product of Cuba in cap space. They needed to spend money. So you get a contract like Tyler Linderbaum's. I know that it's crazy. It's outlandish. Nobody is going to use that as a comp next year simply because they're paying because they have to. There isn't another guy out there that's worth this kind of money. They had to sign somebody huge. That's not a direction for the team. That's a legality issue. They're going to lose draft picks if they don't. So they have to do that. Jalen Naylor, a player from Minnesota, I really liked there. He got paid a lot more than I thought that he would for the same reason. Yeah. So they're influenced. Those are not fair and reasonable transactions in my mind. It's hard to use those as comps. That said, a team like Philadelphia has spent plenty. They have good players. They need to save some cash to get the key guys that they have. And a guy like Reed Blankenship has been a great player for him. Don't get me wrong, but is Reed Blankenship really hard to find, or can we find a guy to build into the next Reed Blankenship? That's the NFL process. The best teams are able to do that. The cheesy and cliche, we don't rebuild, we reload. You've got to have the picks to be able to do that if you're going to do it in a cost-effective way. I think that's where Philadelphia is. And a guy like Phillips, that's a big deal. Philadelphia would have liked to have kept him, I'm sure. But that's probably 30% more than they could have thought he was going to get. So obviously there's a market of one for a guy like that. If he's going to get paid that level of money, it's going to have to be the team that has boatloads of cap space, somebody like Carolina. Those situations play themselves out. Philadelphia is saying, we're going to overpay for some guys, but some of these guys are going to earn their way out of here, and we're going to have to take comp picks in exchange for them. And I think they're happy to do that. With barring other moves, I mean, we're acting like free agency is over. The reality is, I mean, the bulk of the money gets spent in the first 3 days of free agency, but the second wave of free agency after the comp period expires is after the draft or after minicamp. They can sign players without it affecting their comp formula. Other guys will get signed. I think that, generally referred to as the secondary free agency market. I think Philadelphia will be active there, but by and large, they weren't planning on spending a bunch of money. They'll get more picks next year to kind of re-add to the base. As like every team, you tend to go in kind of 3-year periods of time. The Eagles are going to back off a little bit, I think, overall, and try to recoup picks and reload what's generally a very strong roster overall.
Very quickly, no Trey Hendrickson yet. You surprised?
Maybe a little. I do think my guess would be a guy like Phillips signs for that. Hendricks is saying, hey, I'm going to, wait a minute. I was saying this price. Give me more than that. I'm better than this guy is. I've done this. It upped the market a bit. Again, a kind of a surprise deal. I think that's what's, kind of recalibrated things. Not that he had to rush out and sign right away. He's got a little bit of time, but he also knows they're going to go sign other guys here pretty quick. I think overall the Phillips deal drove his market up a bit. And with that, he's tacking on a few $1 million more now, finding out who's interested and who isn't, and other teams are probably talking to they're having internal conversations of what they can do to free up the cash that he now wants and the market now suggests he should get.
Always a pleasure as we go fast and furious in free agency. Thanks so much, Neal.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, guys.
You bet. Neal Coolong joining us. Half hour brought to you by Sunbury Motors, 4th Street in Sunbury. Sunbury Motors Kia, routes 11 and 15 in Hummel's Wharf, and online at sunburymotors.com on News Radio 1070 W.
Bringing you an in-depth look at Penn State sports and more. This is the Steve Jones Show on News Radio 1070 WKOK. The Steve Jones Show is presented by Sunbury Motor Company and Purdy Insurance. Now from the Sunbury Motor Studio, here's Steve Jones.
Half hour brought to you by Purdy Insurance, Market Street in Sunbury. Go to purdyinsurance.com. Auto, home, life. Those are some of the basics. Business insurance, specialty insurance, boat, RV, motorcycle. They'll handle all of it. And we have multiple insurance needs. We don't just have an insurance need. You need somebody that's going to take good care of your policies. Make sure you're fully insured. Find ways to save you money. And they do all of that and more. Customer service means everything to them at Purdy Insurance. Market Street in Sunbury. Go to purdyinsurance.com. All right. So, Penn State, Northwestern tonight, Big Ten tournament. Look, it's tournament time. A lot of crazy things happen. And sometimes crazy good, like for Boston University, Gladden hitting that shot from 35 feet. Sometimes bad, Navy having to watch it go in. Sometimes something good happens, like with the old Georgia Southern team. I'm trying to think what they're called now. And they win 5 straight games to get to the SoCon championship game, where they finally do lose to Furman. But doggone, they won 5 games in a row to get there. I mean, crazy stuff. And there are tournaments underway now. Of course, the conferences, so many conferences, is so much bigger than ever before. I mean, that's why you have tournaments starting today. Bobby Hurley still coaching Arizona State, and they've got 9 seconds to go. They lead Baylor 83-76 in the Big 12 tournament. Pitt has jumped out to a 22-17 lead over Stanford with 6 minutes to go in the first half in the ACC tournament. Later in the ACC tournament, Syracuse takes on SMU. Later in the Big 12 tournament, Utah will take on Cincinnati. The Horizon League championship game is tonight. Detroit Mercy will take on Wright State. The West Coast Conference Tournament Championship is tonight at the Orleans in Las Vegas. I've done a couple of games there before. Gonzaga, no surprise, they're back in it, but Santa Clara knocked off St. Mary's last night, which for them was their first Quad 1 win of the year, and they did something that doesn't normally happen to St. Mary's. St. Mary's, I mean, they scored 76 points on St. Mary's. St. Mary's in conference play in the WCC had only been giving up 64 points per game, and Santa Clara was able to score 76 last night. I'm watching the game, and the pace with which Santa Clara was playing the game told you that they were giving themselves a chance. They weren't playing into the St. Mary's style of slowing the game down. And they were able to push the pace and make things happen. So they got Gonzaga time. Of course, Gonzaga's the favorite in that game. And then the other one with the automatic bid tonight is going to be Detroit Mercy against Wright State. And Wright State will be the favorite in that tonight as well. So that game is taking place this evening. And not quite sure where that is taking place. Where the there it is, right there. I see it. And it is in Indianapolis. Okay, Corteva Coliseum. What is Corteva Coliseum? I mean, what did it used to be? I've never heard of it. I wonder if it's the old farm show arena there. Could be. But there you go. So that is where we are with the tournaments. And, of course, the first game here at the United Center tonight will be Maryland against Oregon. And the winner gets Iowa. And then the second game is Penn State Northwestern, and the winner gets Indiana. And for Indiana, no matter which team they face tomorrow, they desperately need the game because right now they are the definition of a bubble team, Indiana. Now, why they're a bubble team? Okay, why? I actually saw. Now this is Joe Lunardi yesterday. See, and I did not see Joe do an update today because I talked about what Mike DeCourcy had. And what was interesting, because when I say I didn't see what Mike DeCourcy, his was 20 hours old, so it was before the Santa Clara game. But I was looking at Joe Lunardi, and he had, going into yesterday, he had Auburn in. He had him as the last team in. And I was surprised at that. He had Indiana first team out. That doesn't surprise me. But he had Auburn as the last team in. That surprised me. I mean, there were game over 500. There's 16 and 15. I know they have 5 quad one wins, but I don't get it. By the way, I think Furman beat East Tennessee, by the way, to win the SoCon title, so I apologize. I think I got the opponent wrong there. But yeah, the Auburn thing baffles me because down the stretch they're 2-8. The 2-8, they're game over 500. And I know they have Mississippi State to open up, but I mean, they're going to have to knock off somebody, for goodness sakes. And you can't. I remember years. This is the Trey Young year. Trey Young plays 1 year at Oklahoma. He makes a lot of terrific, exciting plays early in the season. And wow, okay. Terrific. Fun, exciting. And then they hit February 1st. And Oklahoma was something like from the last week of January that year on, they were something like 2-12 in their last 14. And I know that when they do today's criteria, when they talk about a full season of work, that a game in November counts as much as a game in February and so forth. They used to have as part of the criteria, one of the items on the criteria was last 12 games. They don't do that anymore. But to me, I think you've got to take a look at least the body of work down the stretch where, like, for example, if you're a team, let's say, let's pick a random number of 10 games. If you're 4-6 in the last 10, okay, depending on who the 4 are, who the 6 are, but like everyone's okay, right? And, especially in a power conference, you're probably playing somebody pretty good somewhere in those 10 games. But now if you're 3-7 in those games, you're starting to leak oil a little bit. And I'm talking about bubble teams. I'm not talking about a team that's squarely in the tournament, like a 5, 6, 7 seed, something like that. Sometimes that stuff happens, but you've done so much and built up so much collateral, it doesn't knock you out. I'm talking about the teams that are getting to that borderline area where you're a 10 through 12 seed. And you're coming down the stretch, and you're Auburn. You're 2-8, and who'd you beat the 2? I mean, one was LSU. That's not okay, that's a win, but it's a win. That's all it is. So that's one of their wins. Let's see here, and let's see. Because they're 2-8, so let's see. Southeastern Conference is 5,000 teams here. LSU, for one thing, is in last place in the league, and Auburn beat them. So where is Auburn on here? Bing, 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 bing. Auburn's way down the list. So they go 7-11 in the league. In February, they were beaten by Alabama by 4, beaten by Vanderbilt by 8. Okay. Those, good teams. Arkansas is a good team, but they beat them by 13. I'm talking about Auburn lost by 13. Mississippi State, by the way, which is the first-round opponent for Auburn, beat Auburn by 6. Auburn beat Kentucky by 1. And they lost to Oklahoma by 12 and lost to Ole Miss by 6. So their wins are Kentucky and LSU. Well, LSU, for one thing, you really the, quote, prohibitive favorite. And Alabama just beat them by a dozen. And I watched some of that game the other night. And to be honest with you, Auburn may have lost by 12, could have been 100. They didn't play well. They were not really in the game. So it is tomorrow. Tomorrow's game, they got Mississippi State. Now, is Auburn the favorite? Yeah, they should be the favorite going in. Mississippi State's 13-18 on the year. That game is not winning the game. Okay, for Auburn, losing the game, they're cooked. They need to win the game to keep it alive. But I am just like a little surprised at Joe Lunardi getting them in at this point, because I know they have 5 quad one wins. They're 5-11 in quad ones, right? That is good. And they play in a conference where you can get a lot of quad one traction. Just like in the Big Ten you can. Indiana's going to need to find a quad one somewhere. They got 3 quad one wins. As I pointed out for perspective, Penn State has 2 quad one wins. That's just perspective. I'm just explaining, where it is. So I am just a bit baffled by that. And for all I know, Joe has updated that since. For all I know, Joe has updated that since. You see, 2 days ago, 20. Boom, boom, boom. Everything's like 2 days ago with Joe. I don't know if there's a latest update from him or not. Let's see. Okay. Bracketology seeds Joe Lunardi. 10 SEC teams included in latest update. Let's just try this, see what we got here. So, I don't know. I was just surprised by it. Not that, like Indiana being first team out, that doesn't surprise me. Okay. And I know Auburn has 2 more quad one wins. I got that part. But down the stretch, neither team has played great. And if there were 76 teams, which is a possibility, we'll see what they want to do with it. Look, I don't think – let me at least get to that part. We're talking about 68 teams right now. If they have 76, both Auburn and Indiana are in the tournament. Is that an argument against it, against the expansion? Yeah. You would think that with 70, for example, with 76 teams, is there an argument about getting Miami of Ohio and Akron both in, even if Miami of Ohio wins the MAC and defeats Akron in the title game? If you have 76 teams, do you get Akron in? Because he goes out to 70. Joe goes out to 76 teams. Akron's not on there. Again, going to 76 benefits the power conferences. Everything will always benefit the power conferences. And I know that that there's been a lot of complaining of late about evening up college sports, and one of them, of course, is the TV contracts. I'm sorry, but excuse me. I want to talk about the TV contracts for a moment. That they should go as one to negotiate deals for TV. I'm sorry, but that's the way it was in the 60s, 70s, and into the early 80s. And the Supreme Court ruled in favor of Georgia and Oklahoma. I mean, let's not forget why they negotiate the deals they negotiate as conferences. The reason they negotiate deals as conferences is because a court case went to the Supreme Court and the NCAA lost. The SEC is not going to give up its money in its TV deal, and the Big Ten's not going to give up its money in its TV deal, and nor should either one of them. Nor should either one of them at this stage. They should not. And when you look at the top 20 schools in TV ratings this past year, and I talked about how Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State, and Oregon were 1, 2, 3, and 4 in the Big Ten. They're all in the top 20. There's a bunch of SECs in there and so on and so forth. Okay? Okay, there are not other conferences in there. I mean, it's and it tells you everything about it. That's what people want to watch. What are you going to put together, an NCAA deal and you force everybody to watch Wake Forest play Georgia Tech? People, sorry, it doesn't. Let's see, college football teams. Let's see. Let's go 2025. Because I saw the list at one point. SEC dominates. There we go. Most watched college football teams. Okay. Here are the most watched college football teams. Okay. Alabama, SEC. Georgia, SEC. Tennessee, SEC. Texas, SEC. Oklahoma, SEC. LSU, SEC. Ohio State, Big Ten. Florida, SEC. Florida State, ACC. Notre Dame Independent, Ole Miss SEC, South Carolina SEC, Michigan Big Ten, Vanderbilt SEC, Auburn SEC, Texas A&M SEC, Penn State Big Ten, Miami ACC, Clemson ACC, Missouri SEC. Then it's Oregon. I mean, you have two SECs, an independent. Excuse me, you have two ACCs, three SECs, an independent, four Big Tens, and ACCs all over the place. They're supposed to give up their money? No. No. And that's as of November 2025. These are all regular season numbers. They're supposed to give that up? I mean, cut me a break. Here's the story from December. That was in November. Okay, Alabama was 1, Texas 2, Georgia 3. These are the averages. Ohio State 4. This is going after the Michigan game now. That was pre-Michigan. Oklahoma 5. So you go. You're going to give up. You're going to say we're going to even out the TV deal. Really? SEC Alabama 1, SEC Texas 2. Georgia SEC 3, Ohio State Big Ten 4, Oklahoma SEC 5, LSU SEC 6, Tennessee SEC 7, Auburn SEC 8, Michigan Big Ten 9, Texas A&M SEC 10, Florida SEC 11, Ole Miss SEC 12, South Carolina SEC 13, Florida State ACC 14, Notre Dame Independent 15, Vanderbilt SEC 16, Missouri SEC 17, Penn State Big Ten 18, Miami ACC 19, Oregon Big Ten 20. I mean, you're telling me that, there's no Big 12 teams in here. There are no Big 12 teams. And you have two ACC teams, an independent, 4 Big Tens in the top 20. But you have people out there screaming, well, they got to even it out. This is bad for college football and so forth. I'm sorry. The market speaks. The market speaks. What was the signature game in the Big 12 last year? Anybody? I mean, what was really the signature game in the ACC last year? Really? You're talking about top-rated bowl games and so forth. Clemson helped out a lot in the Pinstripe Bowl. Penn State was a big reason why that bowl game garnered a record number of viewers. They want to even things out. Now, as for the 76 in the tournament, I probably will talk more about that tomorrow. Because, look, I don't think you go to 72. You want to go to 76. You know you do. Just do the darn thing. Put a second, first four out in the West someplace. Go from there. Doesn't mean I agree with it. I'm saying they're going to do it. I'll tell you a problem they have, and this is a problem. One of the problems that right now the NCAA tournament has is planes, charters. There are not enough charters to go around. Now, they do have, and Mike Rhodes and I were talking about this. I did not know that there was a 400-mile rule, or excuse me, my apologies, a 4-hour rule, in the NCAA, where if you're within 4 hours of a site, you have to bus. I never knew that. I know we have a 4-hour rule at Penn State on busing, which was put in like 10, 12 years ago. So that's why they bus to Maryland, they bus to Rutgers, bus to Philadelphia, Pitt, whatever. They don't fly. And Penn State's had that rule for a long time. I didn't realize the NCAA basketball tournament had the 4-hour rule. So in other words, you're playing, like Duke plays an opening round at Greensboro, they'll bus, which makes sense. I mean, it's not that far from Greensboro to Durham. But I'm just using that as an example. But there is a rule on it, and charters are an issue. And I don't know if that plays a role in what they're thinking about with the NCAA tournament. Expansion means more travel. Hotels they're fine with. They're enough. They have an agreement with Marriott. So between Marriotts and Deltas and Sheratons and so forth, Residence Inns and so forth, you've got plenty of hotels all over the country. That problem's fine. It's the travel part of it. Can you get enough charters to make this happen? And that's why you would need a second first four, which would have to be in the West, because you'd be trying to cut down on some travel for people across the board.